Dr. Kithera's third set of eyes twitched nervously as she reviewed the lesson plan for her advanced xenobiology class. Today would mark the first time in the Galactic University's 300-year history that a human would attend classes alongside civilized species. The administration had been very clear about the protocols: maintain safe distances, avoid sudden movements, and, under no circumstances should anyone challenge the Deathworlder's predatory instincts. The Vorthan professor's scales shifted from their usual calm blue to an anxious purple as students began filing into the lecture hall. Her class consisted of 23 beings from 12 different species, all considered apex intellects of their respective worlds. There were the graceful Etherians with their gossamer wings, the methodical crystalline collective representatives who communicated through harmonic resonance, and the gentle herbaceous people whose photosynthetic skin glowed softly in the artificial light. Then he walked in. Marcus Chun appeared completely unremarkable by human standards: average height, dark hair, wearing the standard university jumpsuit in navy blue. But, to the assembled alien students, he might as well have been a walking nightmare. His forward-facing eyes marked him as a predator species. His exposed teeth, when he smiled, were clearly designed for ripping flesh. Even his casual gait spoke of a creature that had evolved to hunt and kill. A collective intake of breath echoed through the chamber. Several Etherians' wings fluttered in distress, while the herbaceous student's skin flickered to defensive brown tones. One of the crystalline beings emitted a high-pitched harmonic that roughly translated to "Why is the apex predator here?" Marcus seemed oblivious to the fear he generated. He found an empty seat in the middle section, nodded politely to a nearby Vorthan student who immediately scooted 3 seats away, and pulled out his data tablet. Dr. Kithera noticed his movements were deliberately slow and non-threatening, suggesting he was aware of the effect his presence had on others. "Welcome, students, to Advanced Xenobiology," Dr. Kithera began, her voice slightly strained. "Today we will be examining predator-prey relationships in controlled environments. As you know, understanding these dynamics is crucial for maintaining peace in our galactic community." She activated the holographic display, showing a complex ecosystem from the neutral research station orbiting Kepler 442b. Various creatures moved through the simulated environment, some grazing peacefully, others stalking through undergrowth, and a few apex predators maintaining territorial boundaries. "Predation," she continued, "is one of the most fundamental relationships in any ecosystem. It drives evolution, maintains population balance, and creates the complex web of life we observe throughout the galaxy." Her eyes inadvertently drifted toward Marcus, who was taking notes with focused attention. A herbaceous student named Veltar raised a tendril-like arm. "Professor, how do predator species control their hunting instincts in civilized society? Surely the urge to kill must be overwhelming." The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every eye in the room turned toward Marcus, waiting to see if the human would reveal his bloodthirsty nature. Some students tensed, ready to flee if necessary. Marcus looked up from his tablet, seemingly surprised to be the center of attention. "Oh, are you asking me?" He glanced around the room, noting the fearful expressions. "Well, I think there might be some misunderstanding about how human psychology works." Dr. Kithera's scales shifted to an even deeper purple. "Mr. Chun, you don't need to." "No, it's fine," Marcus said, standing slowly. Several students flinched at his movement. "I think this is actually relevant to today's lesson." He gestured toward the holographic display. "See, the assumption is that predator species are driven by bloodlust or uncontrollable killing instincts. But that's not how it works, at least not for humans." He walked toward the front of the class, his steps measured and calm. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We didn't rely on pure aggression or overwhelming strength. We used cooperation, tool use, and, most importantly, empathy. You can't successfully hunt in a group without understanding your prey's behavior and your teammates' needs." A crystalline student resonated a confused harmonic. "But empathy is an anti-predator trait. It promotes cooperation and reduces conflict." "Exactly," Marcus smiled, causing several students to tense at the sight of his teeth. "That's what makes humans unusual among predator species. Our empathy didn't evolve despite our predatory nature. it evolved because of it. We had to understand other minds to be successful. Dr. Kethera found herself genuinely interested despite her nervousness. Could you elaborate on this concept, Mr. Chin? Think about it from an evolutionary perspective, Marcus said, warming to the subject. A lone human with just claws and teeth wouldn't last 5 minutes against a mammoth or a saber-toothed cat. But a group of humans with spears, working together, understanding each other's signals and the prey's behavior patterns, that's formidable. He gestured toward the holographic ecosystem. Most of the predators in your simulation they're designed for individual hunting. Ambush predators, pack hunters with simple coordination or overwhelming physical advantages. Humans evolved something different. We became social predators who survived by outthinking our prey and our environment. An Etherian student named Zephyr spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. But humans are known throughout the galaxy as Deathworlders. Your planet is considered one of the most dangerous environments for complex life. Earth is dangerous, Marcus agreed. But not in the way most species think. Yes, we have large predators and extreme weather, but the real danger is the competition. Everything on Earth is trying to survive in an environment where resources are limited and threats are constant. That pressure didn't just create physically tough organisms, it created mentally adaptable ones. He pulled up his own data tablet, showing images from Earth. Lush forests, vast oceans, snow-capped mountains, and bustling cities filled the display. This is what shaped humans. Not just the predators we had to avoid or the prey we had to catch, but the constant need to adapt, cooperate, and solve problems. The images showed humans in various activities: farming, building, caring for young, creating art, and working together on complex tasks. To the alien students, who had been expecting scenes of violence and hunting, these glimpses of human society were puzzling. "I don't understand," said a Vorthan student named Theklos. "Where is the violence? The hunting? The dominance displays?" Marcus laughed, a sound that made several students jump. That's the point. Human society moved past simple predator-prey dynamics tens of thousands of years ago. We learned that cooperation achieves better results than competition in most situations. We still have competitive instincts, but we channel them into sports, games, academic achievement, and creative endeavors. Dr. Kithera's scales began shifting back toward their normal blue. This is unexpected. Galactic anthropological studies suggested that Deathworld species would be inherently more aggressive and territorially driven. "Oh, humans can definitely be aggressive when necessary," Marcus said. "But aggression is a tool, not a default state. We use it when we need to protect something we care about or when other methods fail. Most of the time, we prefer solutions that benefit everyone involved." He sat on the edge of the professor's desk, a casual movement that would have seemed threatening for most predator species, but somehow appeared relaxed and open. "Actually, I think there's a demonstration that might help explain this better." Before Dr. Kethera could ask what he meant, alarms began blaring throughout the university. Emergency lights bathed the classroom in harsh red illumination as an automated voice announced, "Security breach in Xenobiology Lab 7. All students and faculty evacuate immediately. Repeat, security breach in Lab 7. Panic erupted in the classroom. Students scrambled for the exits, wings flapping, scales flashing warning colors, and harmonics resonating in distress frequencies. Dr. Kethera's educational tablet displayed emergency protocols as she tried to maintain order. "Everyone remain calm," she called out, but her voice was lost in the chaos. "Follow standard evacuation procedures to Assembly Point 3. Marcus stood calmly in the center of the pandemonium, his predator eyes quickly assessing the situation. While other students pushed toward the main exit, he noticed something troubling. The emergency lights were flashing in a specific pattern that indicated the security breach was between their current location and the designated assembly point. "Professor Kethera," he called out, his voice cutting through the noise with surprising authority. "The emergency lights are showing a red 7 pattern. That means the threat is between us and Assembly Point 3. The Vorthan professor paused, her 3 sets of eyes focusing on the light sequence. Her scales went completely white with fear as she realized Marcus was correct. By the stellar winds, you're right. We're cut off from the primary evacuation route. The revelation spread through the remaining students, creating a second wave of panic. Several Etherians began hyperventilating, their gossamer wings beating frantically. The herbaceous students clustered together, their skin flickering between brown and deep red stress patterns. "What do we do?" whispered Veltar, the herbaceous student who had asked about predatory instincts earlier. "We're trapped." Marcus moved to the classroom's main terminal, his fingers dancing over the controls with practiced ease. "Not trapped," he said calmly. "Just need to find an alternative route." The display showed the university's floor plan, with red zones indicating areas to avoid and green zones showing safe passages. There, he pointed to a secondary corridor that led to a maintenance area. "We can take this route to the emergency stairwell, then access Assembly Point 5 instead. It's longer, but it avoids the compromised zone entirely." Dr. Kethera stared at the human in amazement. While every other being in the room was controlled by fear responses, Marcus had immediately shifted into problem-solving mode. His predator brain, instead of triggering fight-or-flight reactions, had analyzed the threat and formulated a solution. "That route goes through the restricted research section," she said hesitantly. "Students aren't authorized. Emergency protocols override access restrictions." Marcus interrupted gently, but firmly. Section 847 of the University Safety Code. The preservation of life takes precedence over security classifications during active threat situations. A crystalline student resonated a tone of disbelief. "How does he know emergency protocols better than we do?" "Humans study safety procedures obsessively," Marcus explained as he gathered his equipment. "It's part of our survival instinct. We like to know all possible escape routes and backup plans before we enter any new environment." He moved toward the secondary exit, then paused when he realized the other students weren't following. They remained clustered near Dr. Kethera, looking between the human and their professor with uncertainty. "I understand you're afraid of me," Marcus said quietly. "Your instincts are telling you that following a predator during an emergency is dangerous. But, right now, I'm the only one in this room whose biology is specifically designed for threat assessment and survival under pressure." Dr. Kethera looked at her students' fearful faces, then at Marcus's calm, confident expression. Every lesson she'd taught about predator-prey relationships suggested that trusting a Deathworlder during a crisis was foolish. But her scientific training also told her that his analysis of the situation was correct. "Mr. Chun," she said slowly, "you're asking us to trust you with our lives." Marcus nodded seriously. "Yes, Professor. I am. And I understand that's not easy. But I give you my word. No human has ever achieved survival by sacrificing their companions. We live or die together." The sincerity in his voice cut through the fear. One by one, the students began moving toward the secondary exit. Dr. Kethera sealed the classroom behind them and activated her emergency beacon to inform rescue services of their alternate route. As they moved through the maintenance corridor, Marcus took point position, his senses alert for any signs of danger. Behind him, 23 alien beings followed a human predator through the depths of their university, trusting their lives to everything they had been taught to fear. What none of them yet realized was that their real test was just beginning. The security breach in Lab 7 wasn't a simple equipment malfunction or containment failure. Something far more dangerous had been released, and it was hunting for prey in the corridors of the Galactic University. Soon, they would all discover exactly what it meant when a human's protective instincts were triggered. The emergency lights continued their ominous red flashing as the group disappeared into the maintenance tunnels, led by the very predator they had feared just minutes before. Behind them, in the abandoned classroom, Marcus's tablet still displayed images of Earth, beautiful, dangerous, and teeming with life that had learned to thrive through cooperation rather than conquest. The real lesson in xenobiology was about to begin. The maintenance corridors of the Galactic University were never designed for emergency evacuations. Narrow passages wound between massive support structures, environmental systems, and data conduits that hummed with the university's electronic heartbeat. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows that danced with each flicker, creating an atmosphere that would have been unsettling even under normal circumstances. Marcus led the group with steady confidence, his tablet displaying the facility schematics while his eyes constantly scanned ahead for potential threats. Behind him, the alien students moved in a tight cluster around Dr. Kethera, their various forms of anxiety manifesting in fluttering wings, shifting scale colors, and discordant harmonics. "Mr. Chun," Dr. Kethera called softly. "How much farther to the emergency stairwell?" "About 200 meters," Marcus replied without turning around. "But we need to be careful here. This section runs parallel to Lab 7, where the breach occurred." As if summoned by his words, a new sound echoed through the tunnels, a rhythmic scraping, like claws on metal, accompanied by a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the very walls. The effect on the alien students was immediate and dramatic. Several Etherians collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by terror. The herbaceous being's skin went completely black, a defensive mechanism that indicated mortal fear. Even the normally composed crystalline students began resonating in chaotic, fearful patterns. "What is that?" whispered Zephyr, the Etherian whose voice shook with primal dread. Marcus stopped walking and held up a hand for silence. His head tilted slightly as he listened, his predator hearing analyzing the sounds with trained precision. After a moment, his expression grew grim. "It's a Kitharan renders," he said quietly. "The scraping sound is from their titanium carbide claws, and that growl indicates it's actively hunting." Dr. Kethera's scales went completely white. "Impossible. Kitharan renders are extinct. They were wiped out during the Great Purge 3 centuries ago." "Apparently not all of them," Marcus replied. "The question is, what was one doing in your xenobiology lab?" The scraping sound grew closer, accompanied now by what sounded like sniffing, a predator following a scent trail. Several students began hyperventilating, their fear responses threatening to overwhelm rational thought. Theklos, the Vorthan student, spoke in a terrified whisper. "Kitharan renders are apex predators from a death world even worse than Earth. They're 3 meters tall, weigh over 400 kilograms, and their claws can slice through military-grade armor. We're all going to die." Marcus turned to face the group, his expression serious but calm. "No, we're not. But I need everyone to listen carefully and do exactly what I say." He pulled up detailed information about Kitharan renders on his tablet, displaying biological data and behavioral patterns. Renders are ambush predators, but they rely heavily on scent tracking and motion detection. They're not as intelligent as some species believe. They're more like organic hunting machines. "How does that help us?" asked Veltar, the herbaceous student whose photosynthetic skin was now pulsing with stress patterns. "Because humans have been dealing with similar predators for our entire evolutionary history," Marcus explained. "We know how to think like them, and, more importantly, how to think around them." The scraping sounds paused, then resumed with what seemed like increased urgency. Something had caught the render's attention. "It's found our scent trail," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "Probably from the classroom. These maintenance tunnels will funnel it right to us unless we do something clever." Dr. Kethera looked around desperately. "The emergency protocols say to hide and wait for rescue when facing a Class A predator threat." "Those protocols were written for normal predators," Marcus replied. "A Kitharan render will hunt for days if necessary. We can't outwait it, and we definitely can't outrun it in these narrow corridors." The human began examining the tunnel structure, running his hands along walls and studying the ceiling supports. His movements were quick but methodical, like someone solving a puzzle under pressure. "There," he said suddenly, pointing to a junction where several large conduits crossed overhead. "Emergency system override junction. If we can trigger a controlled power fluctuation, we might be able to confuse its electroreceptive senses long enough to get past." "That's impossible," said one of the crystalline students. "Those systems are protected by quantum encryption. It would take hours to break through the security." Marcus was already pulling tools from his emergency kit, items that most species would consider primitive, but which humans still carried out of ancestral caution. "I'm not going to break the encryption. I'm going to physically bypass it." "That will trigger massive system alarms," Dr. Kethera protested. "Good," Marcus said, beginning to work on an access panel. "Loud noises and electrical interference will mask our movement and scent. The render might be a perfect killing machine, but it evolved in natural environments. Technological chaos confuses the hell out of them. As he worked, the scraping sounds grew closer and more purposeful. The creature had definitely found their trail and was following it with terrifying persistence. "Why are you helping us?" asked Zephyr suddenly. The Etherian's gossamer wings were trembling, but she managed to voice the question that several others were thinking. "Your species is predatory like the Render. Wouldn't it be easier to just let it have us and escape yourself?" Marcus paused in his work, looking back at the assembled students with genuine surprise. "Is that really what you think humans are like? The galactic databases classify your species as apex predators," Theklos said defensively. "Predators don't typically protect other species young." "But you're not other species young," Marcus replied, returning to his work on the access panel. "You're my classmates. We're part of the same social group now." His tools sparked against the quantum-locked panel as he continued speaking. "Humans don't just protect their genetic family. We extend protective instincts to anyone we consider part of our community. Teammates, classmates, co-workers, neighbors. If you're one of us, then human instincts classify you as worth protecting." A crystalline student resonated a confused harmonic. "But we're different species. There's no evolutionary advantage to protecting us. Evolution gave us the capacity for moral reasoning," Marcus said, finally, breaking through to the power conduit. "What we choose to do with that capacity defines who we are as beings." The scraping sound suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, everyone could hear their own hearts beating, or equivalent organs pumping vital fluids. Then came a new sound, deliberate, heavy footsteps moving in their direction. "It's close," Marcus whispered. "Everyone get behind me, and stay low." "Behind you." Dr. Kithera's scales flickered with confusion. "Shouldn't we scatter? Divide its attention?" "Absolutely not," Marcus said firmly. "Renders are solo hunters. They're designed to chase down individual prey, not handle group tactics. If we stay together and present a unified presence, it might hesitate long enough for my plan to work." He pulled a final wire free from the access panel. Immediately, warning lights began flashing throughout the maintenance tunnel, accompanied by a loud klaxon that echoed off the metal walls. "Now what?" asked Veltar. "Now we move fast and stay quiet," Marcus said. "The electrical interference and noise will confuse its senses, but we need to get to the emergency stairwell before it adapts." The group began moving through the tunnel, Marcus leading with Dr. Kethera helping to keep the students together. Behind them, they could hear the Render's confused growling as it tried to process the sensory chaos Marcus had created. There, Marcus pointed ahead to where a clearly marked emergency exit interrupted the tunnel wall. "Emergency Stairwell C. It leads directly to Assembly Point 5. But, as they approached the stairwell, a new problem became apparent. The access door was sealed with a red warning light, indicating that the stairwell itself was compromised. "The emergency system shows structural damage on floors 3 through 7, Dr. Kethera read from her tablet. "The stairwell isn't safe for evacuation." Behind them, the sounds of the confused Render were growing closer again. It was adapting to the electrical interference faster than Marcus had hoped. "Options?" asked Theklos, trying to keep the terror out of his voice. Marcus studied the facility schematics on his tablet, cross-referencing multiple systems and escape routes. His predator brain processed information rapidly, calculating risks and benefits with the cold efficiency of a creature designed for survival. "There's a research lab on this level that has external window access," he said finally. "Lab 12. If we can get there, we can use emergency rappelling equipment to reach the ground level." Rappelling. Several students spoke the word with obvious dread. "It's controlled descent using rope and friction devices," Marcus explained. "Humans do it recreationally sometimes." The concept of deliberately falling down the outside of a building for fun struck the alien students as additional evidence of human insanity, but they were rapidly running out of alternatives. A new sound echoed through the tunnel, the metallic shriek of claws cutting through the access panel Marcus had sabotaged. The Render had found their position and was tearing through obstacles with mechanical precision. "Lab 12, Marcus said decisively. "Move fast, stay together, and trust me." As they hurried through the maintenance corridors toward their new destination, Dr. Kethera found herself observing the human with scientific fascination despite their desperate situation. His behavior patterns were nothing like what galactic xenobiology had predicted for a Deathworld predator. Instead of the aggressive dominance displays she expected, Marcus consistently put himself between the group and danger. Rather than abandoning weaker members, he adapted his pace to ensure everyone could keep up. Most remarkably, his problem-solving approach emphasized group survival over individual advantage. These observations challenged everything she thought she knew about predator species psychology. But there was no time for academic reflection now. Behind them, the Kithran Render had broken through Marcus's electrical sabotage and was once again following their scent trail with lethal determination. The hunt was far from over, and their escape was about to become even more dangerous. But for the first time since the emergency began, Dr. Kethera found herself believing they might actually survive, not despite having a human predator in their group, but because of it. The maintenance tunnel stretched ahead, leading toward Lab 12 and their next desperate gamble for survival. And, behind them, death followed with titanium claws and mechanical persistence, driving them forward into the unknown. Lab 12 was a spacious xenobotany research facility filled with specimens from across the galaxy. Bioluminescent flora from the Andromeda sector cast an eerie blue glow across workbenches covered with analysis equipment. Atmospheric processors maintained dozens of microenvironments within transparent containment fields, each supporting plant life from different worlds. Marcus quickly scanned the laboratory while the others filed in behind him, their fear evident in every movement. The external windows he'd hoped to find were there, floor-to-ceiling transparisteel panels that offered a view of the university grounds 30 meters below. Emergency rappelling kit should be in the safety locker, Marcus muttered, searching the walls for the distinctive red and yellow markings of emergency equipment. Dr. Kethera checked her tablet while keeping one eye on the sealed laboratory door. Mr. Chun, the security sensors show the render is approximately 40 meters away and closing fast. How long will it take to set up rappelling equipment? For an experienced team? 5 minutes, Marcus replied, locating the emergency locker and breaking the seal. For people who've never done it before, longer than we have. Inside the locker were coiled emergency descent devices, basically sophisticated ropes with friction control mechanisms designed to lower beings safely from elevated positions. The equipment was rated for emergency use by all major galactic species, but Marcus noted with concern that the instructions were written in 17 different languages, none of which included practical human experience. There has to be another way, said Veltar, the herbaceous student whose skin had shifted to deep brown with stress. Surely the university has other emergency protocols. The render is between us and every other escape route, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. And those claws can cut through most barriers given enough time. External escape is our only viable option. A crystalline student resonated a fearful harmonic. But we're 30 meters up. None of our species evolved for climbing or controlled falling. Marcus was busy examining the rappelling equipment, testing weight limits, and mechanical systems. That's why humans will go first and assist everyone else down. The equipment is designed to support 3 times our body weight, so it can handle helping others descend safely. The idea of trusting their lives to a human predator dangling them down the outside of a building struck most of the students as insane. But the rhythmic scraping sounds in the corridor outside were getting closer, accompanied by what sounded like deliberate testing of doors and barriers. It's searching systematically, Dr. Kethera observed, her scales shifting to nervous purple. The render knows we're in this section. Marcus had the rappelling equipment laid out, and was quickly checking each component. Mechanical efficiency. Kithran renders don't get frustrated or give up. They just keep methodically working through obstacles until they reach their prey. He secured the main line to a structural support beam, then began setting up multiple descent points. Professor, I need you to help organize the students by body weight and physical capability. Lightest and most agile go first. Then, we work our way up to those who might need more assistance. You're asking us to trust you completely, Zephyr said, her gossamer wings trembling. To literally put our lives in your hands. Marcus looked up from his equipment preparations, meeting her eyes directly. Yes, I am. And I understand that goes against every instinct your species has developed over millions of years of evolution. He stood and faced the group, his expression serious but calm. But here's what I need you to understand. Humans don't make survival decisions based on individual advantage. When we adopt someone into our group, when we decide you're our people, your survival becomes as important as our own. Why? Asked Theklos bluntly. What evolutionary advantage does that serve? Because a human alone is dead, Marcus replied simply. We evolved as social creatures in a dangerous environment. Our survival has always depended on group cooperation and mutual protection. Abandoning group members isn't just morally wrong for humans. It's strategically stupid. A loud crash echoed through the laboratory door as something heavy struck it from outside. The render had found them. Decision time, Marcus said, moving toward the windows. Trust me and possibly survive, or wait here and definitely become that thing's dinner. Dr. Kethera looked at her terrified students, then at the human who was calmly preparing equipment that could save their lives. Everything in her training said that predators couldn't be trusted, that Deathworld species were inherently dangerous. But everything she had observed in the past hour suggested that human predators operated by fundamentally different rules. Students, she said formally, we will follow Mr. Chin's evacuation plan. The relief on Marcus's face was genuine and visible. Thank you for trusting me. Now, let's get everyone down safely before our uninvited guest breaks through that door. He activated the window release mechanism, and the transparent steel panels slid away to reveal the drop to the university grounds below. Cool evening air flowed into the laboratory, carrying the scents of alien flowers from the campus botanical gardens. Zephyr, Marcus called to the Etherian student, you're first. Your wings give you natural advantage for controlled descent. The gossamer-winged being approached the window with obvious terror, but Marcus's calm confidence was somehow reassuring. He fitted her with a descent harness, explaining each step clearly and checking every connection twice. The device controls your speed automatically, he explained. Just step out backward and let it lower you. Your wings can help you balance and steer away from the building if needed. What if it fails? Zephyr whispered. It won't, Marcus said with absolute certainty. This equipment is over-engineered for safety. Trust the machinery and trust gravity. Another crash shook the laboratory door, followed by the distinctive sound of titanium claws scraping against metal. The render was testing the barrier's strength. Go, Marcus said gently, and Zephyr stepped backward out of the window. The descent went perfectly. Her natural wing control allowed her to drift safely away from the building as the mechanical system lowered her at a controlled rate. Within 2 minutes, she was standing on solid ground, looking up and waving to indicate success. Crystalline team next, Marcus called, already fitting harnesses on the 3 harmonic beings. Your natural resonance will help you coordinate movement during descent. One by one, the students went over the side. Marcus assisted each personally, checking equipment, explaining procedures, and providing reassurance. His predator reflexes allowed him to spot and correct potential problems instantly, while his human social instincts kept everyone calm and focused. Dr. Kethera watched in amazement as her most terrified students trusted their lives to the very being they had feared just hours ago. The human's patience seemed infinite, his expertise genuine, and his protective instincts completely contrary to everything galactic science said about Deathworld predators. The laboratory door began to buckle outward as the render applied systematic pressure to its weakest points. Professor, you're next, Marcus said, offering Dr. Kethera a harness. What about you? She asked. Who assists the human down? Marcus smiled, and, for the first time, his predator teeth didn't frighten her. Humans have been climbing and falling out of trees for millions of years. This is what we call a Tuesday. She descended quickly, her 3 sets of eyes allowing her to judge distances and obstacles better than most species. As she reached the ground, she looked up to see Marcus silhouetted against the laboratory lights, calmly coiling the rappelling equipment. The door finally gave way with a thunderous crash. The Kitharan render burst into the laboratory with terrifying speed, its 3-meter frame moving with predatory grace. Titanium carbide claws extended from massive hands as its sensory organs locked onto Marcus's position near the window. For a moment, the two predators faced each other across the laboratory. One a perfect biological killing machine evolved for individual dominance, the other a social predator designed for group survival and cooperation. Marcus didn't run. Instead, he did something that confused the Render's hunting protocols completely. He began talking. "Easy there, big guy," Marcus said in a calm, steady voice. "I know you're probably scared and confused. Being in captivity, then, suddenly, free in a strange environment, that's got to be disorienting." The Render paused, its sensory organs analyzing this unexpected response. Its prey wasn't running or showing fear displays. Instead, the small biped was making vocalizations in a non-threatening tone. "You're a magnificent specimen," Marcus continued, slowly moving toward the window. "Apex predator from a world that makes Earth look like a garden party. I respect that." Below, the rescued students watched in fascination and terror as the human attempted to communicate with certain death. "But here's the thing," Marcus said, reaching the window. "These people are under my protection now. And humans get really, really serious about protecting our adopted family." With that, he stepped backward out of the window. But instead of using the rappelling equipment, Marcus did something that made the watching aliens question human sanity once again. He grabbed the building's external support structure and began free-climbing down the outside wall, using the architectural features as handholds. The Render rushed to the window, confused by prey that had simply vanished instead of running in terror. Its hunting protocols, evolved for ground-based pursuit, had no framework for understanding three-dimensional escape routes. Marcus dropped the final 3 meters, landing in a practiced roll that absorbed the impact. He stood up, dusted himself off, and looked up at the Render framed in the laboratory window. "And that," he called up to the frustrated predator, "is why humans survived long enough to reach the stars." The Render's roar of frustration echoed across the university campus as security forces finally arrived, equipped with specialized containment equipment designed for exactly this type of situation. As the emergency teams worked to recapture the escaped predator, Dr. Kethera and her students gathered around Marcus, their fear replaced by something approaching awe. "You climbed down the outside of a building," Theklos said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Without equipment. 30 meters. Humans used to live in trees," Marcus replied with a shrug. "We're pretty good at the up and down thing." But Zephyr, the Etherian who had been first to trust him, had a different observation. "You could have left us, used the rappelling equipment yourself, and escaped immediately. Why didn't you?" Marcus looked at the group of alien students who had trusted him with their lives. And his answer was simple. "Because that's not how humans work. We protect our own." Dr. Kithera's scales had shifted to a warm golden color, a Vorthan expression of deep respect and gratitude. "Mr. Chun, I believe my xenobiology class just learned more about predator psychology in one day than we typically cover in an entire semester." As security teams confirmed the Render's containment and declared the emergency over, the group began walking back toward the main campus. But something fundamental had changed. The human was no longer walking alone at the front or back of the group. Instead, he was surrounded by alien students who were asking questions, sharing observations, and treating him like what he had proven himself to be, a friend. The real education was just beginning. 3 weeks after the Kithran Render incident, advanced xenobiology had become the most popular class at Galactic University. Word had spread throughout the academic community about the human who had successfully evacuated 23 alien students from a Deathworld predator, and enrollment requests were flooding Dr. Kithera's administrative inbox. But the most significant change was in the classroom dynamics themselves. Where once students had maintained careful distances from Marcus Chun, now he found himself surrounded by eager companions who peppered him with questions about human behavior, Earth ecology, and Deathworld survival tactics. "Marcus," called Zephyr, the Etherian whose gossamer wings now fluttered with excitement rather than fear. "Can you explain again how persistence hunting works? The concept of chasing prey until it collapses from exhaustion seems incredibly inefficient compared to ambush tactics." Dr. Kethera smiled as she watched the interaction. Her scales had permanently shifted to a warmer blue since the incident, reflecting her newfound appreciation for human complexity. Actually, that's an excellent segue into today's lesson on cooperative hunting strategies. She activated the holographic display, showing various pack predators from across the galaxy. As Mr. Chen demonstrated during our recent emergency, predator behavior is far more nuanced than simple aggression models suggest. Marcus had become an unofficial teaching assistant, his real-world experience providing context that no textbook could match. The key thing to understand, he said, standing to address the class, is that human hunting was never about individual dominance. It was about group problem-solving. He gestured toward a holographic representation of early humans pursuing a mammoth across ancient grasslands. Look at this scenario. A single human with a spear has almost no chance against a mammoth. But a coordinated group with tools, strategy, and communication? That changes everything. Theklos, the Vorthan student who had initially been most terrified of Marcus, now sat in the front row taking detailed notes. But how did early humans coordinate such complex group activities without modern communication technology? The same way we coordinated our escape from the render, Marcus replied. Empathy, pattern recognition, and social bonding. Humans had to evolve the ability to understand what their teammates were thinking and feeling, or the hunt would fail. A new student, a silicate being named Crystal Song of Deep Waters, resonated a curious harmonic. She had transferred into the class specifically to study human behavior after hearing about the incident. This suggests that predatory behavior and social cooperation evolved together in humans, rather than in opposition. Exactly, Dr. Kethera confirmed. Human evolution represents a unique synthesis of traits that are often considered mutually exclusive in other species. Marcus pulled up images of various Earth predators on his tablet, sharing them with the class display. Most predator species develop along fairly predictable lines. Big cats evolve stealth and overwhelming physical power. Pack hunters like wolves develop coordination, but maintain strict hierarchies. Humans went a different route entirely. The images showed lions, wolves, sharks, and eagles, all impressive predators, but each specialized for specific hunting strategies. We became generalist predators, Marcus continued. Instead of developing one overwhelming advantage, humans developed adaptability. We can hunt alone or in groups. We can use stealth or persistence. We can employ tools or rely on physical capability. Most importantly, we can switch between strategies based on circumstances. Veltar, the herbaceous student, raised a tendril arm. His photosynthetic skin had lost its fearful brown tones and now glowed with healthy green curiosity. Is that why you were able to handle the render situation so effectively? Adaptability? Partly, Marcus agreed. But there's something else that's specifically human. We don't just adapt our hunting strategies, we adapt our definition of pack. Dr. Kethera leaned forward with interest. Could you elaborate on this concept, Mr. Chen? Marcus looked around the classroom, his gaze touching each student who now considered him a friend rather than a threat. Most pack predators have fixed social structures based on genetic relationships or dominance hierarchies. Human packs are voluntary associations based on shared goals and mutual benefit. He stood and began walking among the students, a movement that would have caused panic weeks ago, but now seemed natural. When the emergency started, you weren't genetically related to me. You weren't part of my original social group. But the moment we faced a common threat together, my brain categorized you as pack members deserving protection. But that seems evolutionarily disadvantageous. Crystal Song of Deep Waters resonated. Why would humans expend energy protecting non-relatives? Because it works, Marcus replied simply. Humans who cooperated with diverse groups survived better than humans who only helped genetic relatives. Over time, our brains evolved to form protective bonds with anyone who contributes to group survival. Dr. Kethera called up new data on the holographic display, comparative studies of social structures across different species. This cooperative flexibility appears to be a key factor in human expansion across the galaxy. Humans can form functional social bonds with other species more readily than most predators. Is that why galactic databases got human psychology so wrong? Asked Zephyr. The researchers were looking for typical predator patterns? The databases weren't wrong about human predatory capability, Marcus said seriously. Humans are definitely dangerous when we need to be. But they completely missed how our predatory instincts integrate with our social instincts. He returned to the front of the classroom, his expression thoughtful. When humans perceive a threat to their adopted pack, we don't become more aggressive in the way other predators do. We become more protective. There's a big difference. To demonstrate, Marcus called up footage from the university's security cameras during the render incident. The class watched their evacuation from an external perspective, seeing how Marcus consistently positioned himself between the group and danger, how he modified his own escape to ensure everyone else's safety, and how he deliberately drew the render's attention away from the others. Aggression is about dominance and territory, Marcus explained as they watched. Protection is about preserving what you value. Humans value their chosen pack members above their own individual survival. The footage showed the moment when Marcus chose to free climb down the building rather than use the safer rappelling equipment, ensuring it remained available for any students who might need emergency evacuation. That was completely irrational behavior, noted a new student, a geometric being whose crystalline structure allowed for perfect logical processing. The statistical probability of successful free climbing was significantly lower than using mechanical assistance. Rationality depends on your value system, Marcus replied. If individual survival is your highest priority, then, yes, it was irrational. But if group survival is your highest priority, it made perfect sense. Dr. Kethera highlighted this exchange in her notes. This represents a fundamental difference in decision-making algorithms between humans and most other species. Humans optimize for group outcomes rather than individual outcomes. Crystal Song of Deep Waters resonated thoughtfully. This might explain why human diplomatic missions have been so successful throughout the galaxy. Other species have interpreted human cooperation as weakness, but actually it represents a different type of strength. The observation sparked an animated discussion among the students. Examples flowed of human diplomatic successes, trade negotiations, and scientific collaborations that had initially puzzled xenopsychologists. Humans consistently prioritize long-term relationships over short-term advantages, noted Theklos. That behavior pattern confused species who expected typical predator dominance displays. Marcus nodded. When humans meet a new species, we're not thinking about whether we can dominate them or whether they might threaten us. We're thinking about whether they might become valuable allies or pack members. Even with species that could easily overpower humans physically, asked Veltar. Especially with species that could overpower us, Marcus laughed. Humans learned a long time ago that making friends with the biggest, strongest beings around is usually smarter than trying to fight them. Dr. Kethera called up images of various human diplomatic missions throughout galactic history. In each case, human negotiators had focused on building personal relationships and finding mutual benefits rather than leveraging advantages or exploiting weaknesses. The Centauri Trade Accords, she noted, were initially stalled for 17 years until human mediators introduced the concept of face-saving compromises that allowed all parties to claim victory. Because humans understand that everyone needs to feel good about the outcome, Marcus explained. Humiliating someone might give you a short-term win, but it creates a long-term enemy. Humans prefer long-term friends. The discussion was interrupted by an announcement over the university's communication system. All students and faculty, please welcome our newest guest researcher, Dr. Vexhai Kitheron, who will be conducting behavioral studies in our xenopsychology department. The name triggered immediate recognition among the students. Kitheron was a Kitheran scientist, the same species as the render that had nearly killed them weeks ago. The classroom fell silent as the implications sank in. A member of the galaxy's most feared predator species would be working in their university, studying behavioral patterns that might include their own recent experiences. Marcus noticed the sudden tension and quickly understood its source. Interesting timing, he said calmly. This should provide an excellent opportunity to test our theories about interspecies cooperation. Dr. Kithera's scales shifted slightly toward purple, but she maintained her composure. Indeed, Dr. Kitharon's research focuses on predator-prey relationship dynamics across different environments. Will we be meeting with this researcher? Asked Zephyr, her wings trembling slightly at the thought. Actually, came a new voice from the classroom entrance. I was hoping to observe your class today. Everyone turned to see a being that was unmistakably Kitharon, tall, powerfully built, with the characteristic sensory organs and retractable claws of their species. But Dr. HFY Kitharon moved with controlled grace rather than predatory menace, and her scientific robes marked her as an academic rather than a warrior. The students' fear responses were immediate and instinctive. Even after weeks of learning about predator psychology, facing another member of the species that had nearly killed them triggered primal terror. All except Marcus, who stood and extended his hand in the traditional human greeting gesture. Dr. Kitharon, he said calmly. I'm Marcus Chun. Welcome to our xenobiology class. I think you'll find today's discussion quite relevant to your research. The Kitharon scientists studied Marcus with obvious fascination, her sensory organs analyzing his complete lack of fear response. You are the human who encountered our escaped laboratory specimen. I am, Marcus confirmed. And these are my classmates who shared that experience. Dr. Kitharon's attention shifted to the terrified alien students. Then, back to Marcus. You protect them. Even now, when they show clear fear responses to my presence, you position yourself as a barrier between us. Marcus glanced down, realizing he had indeed unconsciously moved to shield the other students. Human reflex. When pack members show distress, we respond protectively. Fascinating, Dr. Kitharon murmured, taking notes on a handheld device. The human demonstrates classic guardian behavior despite having no genetic relationship to the protected individuals. Dr. Kethera found her voice, though her scales remained nervous purple. Dr. Kitharon, would you be interested in participating in our discussion? Your perspective on predator psychology might provide valuable insights. The next hour would prove to be one of the most educational in the university's history, as two predator species, one individual, one social, began to explore the fundamental differences in how evolution had shaped their approaches to survival and cooperation. Dr. HFY Kitharon moved through the classroom with careful precision, her predatory grace controlled and deliberate. The alien students remained clustered near Marcus, their various fear responses creating a symphony of distress signals, fluttering wings, shifting scale colors, and discordant harmonics that filled the air with tension. Your specimen, the render that escaped, Marcus said, his voice conversational despite the obvious stress his presence was causing everyone else. How long had it been in captivity? Dr. Kitharon's sensory organs focused on Marcus with scientific interest. 17 standard years. It was captured as a juvenile for behavioral research, but the project was terminated when funding shifted to less dangerous subjects. 17 years in isolation, Marcus repeated thoughtfully. That explains the behavioral abnormalities I observed during our encounter. The Kitharon scientist paused, her retractable claws extending slightly, not in threat, but in what Marcus recognized as a species-specific expression of surprise. You observed behavioral abnormalities? Most beings who encounter a Kitharon render describe only terror and the overwhelming desire to flee. Terror would have gotten my classmates killed, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. So I observed instead. The render was hunting, yes, but not efficiently. Its search patterns were repetitive and mechanical rather than adaptive. It seemed confused by environmental stimuli that should have been straightforward for an apex predator. Dr. Kithera's scales shifted from nervous purple toward fascinated blue. Mr. Chun, you're suggesting that prolonged captivity affected the creature's natural hunting instincts? Absolutely, Marcus said. Predators need environmental stimulation to maintain peak performance. 17 years in a sterile laboratory would be like keeping a master musician locked in a soundproof room. The skills atrophy. Dr. Kitharon's entire posture changed. Where before she had been observing the class as a researcher studying test subjects, now she was engaged as a fellow scientist, discussing a shared interest. This observation aligns with my preliminary findings. The recaptured specimen showed significant behavioral deficits compared to baseline Kitharon render parameters. What kind of deficits? Asked Zephyr, her curiosity overcoming her fear enough to participate in the conversation. Reduced spatial awareness, inefficient energy expenditure, and, most notably, an inability to properly assess threat levels, Dr. Kitharon explained. The specimen should have recognized that Mr. Chun represented a potential danger and either avoided him entirely or treated him as a serious threat. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You consider me a potential danger? The Kitharon scientist's response was clinical but respectful. Mr. Chun, you are a Deathworld predator who successfully outmaneuvered one of our species' most formidable hunters. Any Kitharon with functional threat assessment protocols would classify you as extremely dangerous. This statement had an unexpected effect on the alien students. Instead of increased fear, they began looking at Marcus with something approaching pride. Their classmate, their friend, had earned the respect of another apex predator species. But here's what's interesting from a behavioral perspective, Dr. Kitharon continued, her scientific excitement overriding social protocols. You didn't engage the render as a rival predator. Instead, you treated it as a problem to be solved while prioritizing the safety of noncombatants. Because that's what it was, Marcus replied. The render wasn't evil or malicious. It was confused and following damaged instincts. The real problem was getting everyone to safety. Dr. Kitharon pulled out her research tablet, showing behavioral analysis charts. This approach is completely contrary to standard predator psychology. When two apex species meet, the expected response is territorial challenge, dominance display, or retreat. Cooperative problem-solving is not predicted by any current xenopsychological models. Theklos, emboldened by the academic discussion, asked, what would a normal Kitharon response have been in that situation? Direct confrontation. Dr. Kitharon answered immediately. A Kitharon would have challenged the render to establish dominance hierarchy. The outcome would be determined by individual combat capability. And everyone else in the area, asked Veltar, would be considered irrelevant to the dominance contest, Dr. Kitharon admitted. Kitharon psychology doesn't include protection of non-pack members during territorial disputes. The contrast was stark and illuminating. Crystal Song of Deep Waters resonated a thoughtful harmonic. So human protective instincts extend beyond pack boundaries, while Kitharon protective instincts are limited to genetic or dominance relationships. That appears to be accurate, Dr. Kitharon confirmed. Though I must note that this protective behavior toward non-relatives is unprecedented in my research. It challenges fundamental assumptions about predator species psychology. Dr. Kethera seized the educational opportunity. Class, we're witnessing a perfect example of how different evolutionary pressures create different behavioral adaptations. Both humans and Kitharons are successful predator species, but they've developed completely different social strategies. Marcus looked thoughtful. Dr. Kitharon, may I ask about your research methods? Are you studying predator behavior in isolation, or do you examine social contexts as well? Primarily isolation studies, she replied. Kitharon research methodology focuses on individual capability assessment. Social variables are considered contaminating factors that complicate data interpretation. That might be why your models don't predict human behavior accurately, Marcus suggested gently. For humans, social context isn't a contaminating factor. It's the primary factor. We literally evolved to be social predators. Dr. Kitharon's sensory organs refocused on Marcus with intense interest. Could you elaborate on this concept? The idea of social predation as a primary evolutionary strategy rather than a secondary adaptation. Marcus stood and moved to the holographic display, pulling up images of early human communities. Look at human development from an ecological perspective. We weren't the strongest, fastest, or most individually capable predators on Earth, but we were the most cooperative. The display showed human ancestors working together to hunt massive prey, build complex shelters, and care for young and elderly community members. Every major human survival strategy required group coordination. Hunting, defense, tool creation, knowledge preservation, all of it depended on our ability to work together effectively. But cooperation requires trust, observed Dr. Kitharon. How do predators develop trust relationships without triggering competitive instincts? Through empathy and shared benefit systems, Marcus explained. Humans who could understand and care about their teammates' welfare were more successful than humans who competed with their teammates. He gestured toward his alien classmates. That's why I can form protective bonds with beings from completely different species. My brain doesn't distinguish between genetic pack members and chosen pack members. If someone is part of my social group, the protective instincts activate automatically. Dr. Kitharon began taking rapid notes. This suggests that human predatory success depends on expanding pack boundaries rather than defending them. Most predator species maintain strict territorial limits. Exactly, Dr. Kethera interjected. And this might explain why human integration into galactic society has been so successful despite initial fears about Deathworld species. Zephyr spoke up, her wings fluttering with excitement. Marcus, when you decided to protect us during the emergency, was that a conscious decision or an automatic response? Marcus considered the question carefully. Both, I think. The immediate protective positioning was automatic, human predator reflexes kicking in when pack members showed distress. But the specific tactical decisions were conscious applications of human survival knowledge. The specimen's presence triggered your protective instincts, but your response was calculated rather than emotional, Dr. Kitharon observed. This indicates sophisticated integration of instinctive and rational decision-making processes. Human emotions and rationality aren't opposite forces, Marcus explained. They're collaborative systems. Fear tells me there's a threat, but reason helps me choose the best response. Protectiveness tells me someone needs help, but training helps me provide effective assistance. Dr. Kitharon looked around the classroom, noting how the alien students had gradually moved closer to both Marcus and herself during the discussion. Fear responses had been replaced by curiosity and engagement. Remarkable, she murmured. Your presence has actually reduced their stress responses to mine. They're using your calm behavior as a social cue to override their instinctive fear. That's how human pack dynamics work, Marcus confirmed. Pack members look to each other for behavioral guidance. If I'm not afraid of you, it signals that you might be safe for them too. Crystal's Song of Deep Waters resonated with understanding. So human protective behavior includes modeling safe responses to new situations. Teaching and learning are survival skills for humans, Marcus agreed. We share knowledge and behavioral strategies because everyone's survival depends on the group's collective competence. Dr. Kitharon was now completely absorbed in documenting these interactions. Mr. Chen, would you be willing to participate in formal research sessions? This pack-bonding behavior with non-relatives could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies cooperation. Only if my classmates can participate too, Marcus replied immediately. The behavior you're studying isn't individual, it's relational. You can't understand human pack dynamics by studying humans in isolation. Dr. Kithera's scales had shifted to bright gold, the forth an expression of profound academic excitement. Dr. Kitharon, I believe we have the opportunity to conduct groundbreaking research in applied xenopsychology. Agreed, the Kitharan scientist said. Though I must note that this research will require significant modifications to standard Kitharan methodology. Studying social predators requires social research approaches. Marcus grinned, his predator teeth no longer frightening to anyone in the room. Welcome to human-style science, Dr. Kitharon. We tend to be very collaborative. The conversation continued for another hour, with students from multiple species contributing observations about interspecies cooperation, pack formation, and adaptive behavioral strategies. By the end of the session, Dr. Kitharon had filled several research tablets with notes and was actively planning a comprehensive study of human pack bonding behavior. As the class ended and students began filing out, Marcus noticed that they were no longer avoiding Dr. Kitharon. Several actually approached her with questions about Kitharan culture and research methodologies. Fascinating, Dr. Kitharon observed. They show no remaining fear responses to my presence. That's because you're part of the pack now, Marcus explained. You participated in our social learning session, contributed valuable knowledge, and showed respect for our group dynamics. From a human perspective, that makes you a teammate. Dr. Kethera overheard this exchange and approached them both. Gentlemen and lady, I believe we have just witnessed the formation of the first multi-species research pack in galactic academic history. Dr. Kitharon's retractable claws extended in what Marcus now recognized as Kitharon expression of pleased surprise. A research pack. I find this concept unexpectedly appealing. Marcus looked around the classroom where beings from 15 different species were chatting animatedly about predator psychology, cooperative behavior, and research methodologies. The human who had been feared as a dangerous Deathworlder was now surrounded by alien friends who trusted him completely. You know, he said thoughtfully, I think this xenobiology class just became a lot more interesting. Dr. Kithera's scales glowed bright gold as she watched her diverse students planning study groups and research collaborations. Mr. Chun, I believe you've just demonstrated the most important lesson in xenobiology. The best way to understand another species is to become part of their social group. The semester was only beginning, but already the advanced xenobiology class had become something unprecedented in galactic academic history. A true interspecies pack, united not by genetics or dominance, but by shared curiosity, mutual respect, and the very human principle that everyone deserves protection and belonging. Outside the classroom windows, the university campus bustled with beings from hundreds of worlds, most still maintaining careful species boundaries and traditional social hierarchies. But inside room 247, a small group of students and researchers had just discovered what humans had known for millennia. The strongest bond isn't fear or dominance, but the simple recognition that we're all in this together. The human Deathworlder had indeed brought something dangerous to class, dangerous to old assumptions, traditional barriers, and the comfortable isolation of species-specific thinking. In its place, he had offered something far more powerful, the possibility of chosen family that transcended every boundary except the willingness to care for each other. The pack had formed, and the galaxy would never be quite the same.